Vanessa, just to check, is the proper screen showing?
Yes, you are good.
Okay, excellent.
And I think everyone came in from the waiting room. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa, and today we are going to be talking about creating basic shapes in Adobe Illustrator with Bridget McFadden from ITS Communications. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know I am recording today's session. So when this session is complete, you should get a follow-up email from me later today with a link to this recording, as well as any useful guides and anything else that'll get you started with Adobe Illustrator. I also have everybody on mute. This is because we are expecting a lot of people to join us today, and I want to prevent any unintended background noise. But if you have a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to post it in the chat, or you can raise your hand in the reactions panel at the bottom of your Zoom window, and you can come off the mic. I'll just remove the mic for you so that you can ask your question. Just so everyone knows too, this is the last Tech Tuesday before we go into summer break, and then we'll return for the fall. But please expect an email from us in the next week or so with a very short survey of asking what you'd like to learn about during the next Tech Tuesday session that starts in the fall. We really want to make sure that we're bringing you the topics that you want to learn about for different services that we offer. And we really appreciate your feedback. It definitely helps us put together our calendar for the next fiscal year. So without further ado, I am going to hand it off to Bridget. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to take a look at how you can use Adobe Illustrator to draw basic shapes and figures to enrich your daily outputs and also supplement medical and scientific publications, if that's what you're working on. Illustrator can be used to make some of the graphic assets you might be relying on other programs right now, like Word or PowerPoint, to make. If you produce them in Illustrator, you're creating them in a powerful, more sophisticated tool and in a file format that's preferred by many publications, formats with the extension .eps and .ai. The little figure in the bottom left-hand corner was something I drew in Illustrator many years ago when I was first learning how to use it. It probably looks familiar to you all. It's our hospital. Since the days when I drew that, I think the tool has just continued to expand and grow. So you can draw much cooler things with it than this little drawing, but that is one of the things you can produce. What is Adobe Illustrator? It is the industry standard vector graphics tool, and I'll explain in just a moment what vector graphics means. It creates files in AI, EPS, and PDF formats. It creates vector-based art, which is resolution independent. Okay, what do we mean by resolution independent? Resolution refers to the number of pixels in an image. It's commonly expressed as DPI, dots per inch, which is going back to, actual printing on a page when they're talking about how many dots of ink are being printed per inch on a piece of paper. Or in digital formats, it's referred to as PPI, which is pixels per inch, and that's talking about pixels of color being displayed on your screen. Oops, sorry, let's go to the next slide just to illustrate what this is. So pixels are picture elements. They're tiny squares of individual color that make up what you see on the screen. And all of these tiny squares of color come together to form the images you see. Bitmap images, also known as raster, which is this image on the left, frequently those have the extension JPEG or TIFF, and these are kind of like your typical photo file images. They are made up of pixels on a grid, and with these types of bitmap images, like the photographs taken on a camera, the image can only be scaled up to a certain size before the individual pixels become visible and the image starts to look bad. Vector images, on the other hand, like the image on the left with the extension EPS, are not composed of pixels. Rather, they're instructions for drawing the image. Instead of being recorded as blocks on a grid, vector images consist of lines, points, and curves. Since they're made up of a series of mathematical coordinates, they can be blown up to any size and still remain sharp. So when you say a vector graphic is resolution independent, that means that no matter how big or small it gets, its quality stays the same. Here's another image just to illustrate what I was talking about. As you can see, this line painted with pixels, if you zoom in really closely, you can see all of the little individual packets of color on the screen represented as little squares. Whereas the one on the right, because it's being drawn with vectors, it's points and lines being plotted on a coordinate. So if you zoom in really closely, the line still looks clean and clear at any size or distance. Vector images are the preferred choice of image type for things like logos and branding and publications. For that very reason, they can be used at a really small scale, like on a business card, or blown up really large for a poster or a billboard. Vector images have a lot of advantages, but the primary disadvantage is that they're unsuitable for producing photorealistic imagery. So they're usually made up of solid areas of color or gradients, but they can't really depict continuous, subtle tones in a photograph. So most of the vector images you'll see will have kind of a cartoon-like appearance. Let's go back to this, but they're not as good at representing these kind of subtle shifts in color as you can see in a painting or a pastel or a photograph. Any questions before I move on about vector-based art and what we're talking about when we say like a vector file versus a bitmap file? Okay, let me move on to very important question. How do I get Illustrator if I work at Weill Cornell Medicine? So if you are staff or faculty, we do have a number of licenses that are available at no cost, and you'll go to my helpdesk.weill.cornell.edu to submit a request for that. If you're students, unfortunately, we can't offer them at no cost, but if you go to weillcornell.onthehub.com, licenses are available for a discount. For staff and faculty, once you go to the address on the screen, myhelpdesk.weill.cornell.edu, you'll see this ticket on the center of the screen that says request something. If you click on that, it brings you to our service catalog, and you'll see a bunch of different request forms that we have. In the window, type in Adobe Creative Cloud, and it will bring you to the specific request form for Creative Cloud. You'll fill in all your personal information as well as your business justification for having the cloud. Again, because we have a limited number of licenses, we just have to make sure we assign them to people who really need the tool. But if your job entails anything where you're kind of creating visual assets for the things you produce, that's enough. Once you are assigned the Creative Cloud license, you'll have instructions to sign into Adobe Creative Cloud, and it will pull you to this dashboard where you see all the different applications you can download within the cloud. That includes Illustrator. It also includes common applications like InDesign, Photoshop, After Effects, kind of any of these tools you use to make cool visual components for your work. What can you do with Illustrator at Weill Cornell Medicine? So as we all know, there are a lot of different tools and more coming every day to kind of create visual assets for what you produce. I think Illustrator is good for creating custom logos and infographics. Oftentimes we'll launch kind of a new service within ITS that we want to brand in a certain way, and Illustrator is a really nice tool to create some kind of visual personality for the service that's being offered. You can add text to photos. It's a really quick way to do that. Layer on text on top of like a photo image. You can draw figures for papers. Oftentimes when we're launching new, let's say like e-forms or any sort of new procedure, there's kind of a complicated workflow that goes along with that can be complex to explain in words, but much more simple to explain in pictures. And if you can use Illustrator just to draw a couple basic related shapes to illustrate something like a complicated workflow, it's a nice way to illustrate that for your users. You can make communications cute. You can modify floor plans, and you can also illustrate data with graphs. Illustrator has a really cool graph building function. Here's just a couple examples of what I was talking about. An infographic is one nice use of Illustrator. You can also start with templates. Like I think this one we drew to illustrate ITS service management. I downloaded a template in the EBS format that I knew Illustrator could read. And then you can kind of customize the text, the color, the icons. So you don't always have to start from scratch. Like there are a lot of things that already exist built in this format that you can use Illustrator to modify to suit your needs. You can make communications cute. Sometimes we launch technical things that don't seem that exciting, but if you use Illustrator to kind of make it a little more interesting, it's a way to sell a new service. This is an example of how to add text to photos. This drawing of the cubicles in the space I believe was a JPEG, and then you could just open it up in Illustrator and add some text on top of it. Um, This is an example of the graph function in Illustrator. This is a demo for another day, but we frequently use Illustrator, like when Vanessa and I produce the annual report for the department and we need to illustrate data in bar graphs or pie graphs. Illustrator is my first stop to kind of whip up a little graph that is in branded colors, and is a good way to depict data that you want to appear more meaningful. You can also modify floor plans. Years ago, I worked with a woman in capital planning who was trying to present something to her stakeholders and needed to color code a floor plan, and Illustrator was a nice tool to do that in as well. Okay, without further ado, let's get back to the subject of this demo, which was Illustrator for scientists. I want to draw something very scientific, which is a mitochondria. In the demo in Illustrator, we're going to show you how to use artboards, how to draw basic shapes, how to play with fill and stroke, which is just how you add color to a shape, how to combine and subtract shapes, how to add text, how to place and crop a JPEG image file, and then how to export so that if you create something in Illustrator and you need to send it to someone who maybe doesn't have the application, or you want to pop it in an email or in a Word document, I will show you how to export it to a file format that works for that. Before I move on to the demo, any questions about what we've talked about so far?
No questions yet. I just put in the chat the form that you can use to request a license for Adobe Creative Cloud, which includes Illustrator and many of the applications that Bridget mentioned just in her introduction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to end my PowerPoint and then share Illustrator screen. Okay. Vanessa, do you see the Illustrator?
Yes, I can see your
Okay.
Illustrator app open.
So to those of you, I'm going to move some windows around. To those of you who have not used Illustrator before, this probably looks a little bit intense. A lot of Adobe applications do until you get to know them. But this is what your workboard looks like in Illustrator. And I have it kind of set up for the demo, but I also want to show you just how you start from scratch when you open this application. You'll go up to File New, just as you do kind of in any application, and you'll see a window where it lets you open up kind of a preset size. I have it preset to 5x7. Let's just keep everything on here. We create a new file. And then from here, you can see it just has me set up with one 5x7 artboard. I want to show you how to draw out multiple artboards like I have on the demo screen. So that I'm going to go over to this tool panel on the left. And if I scroll all the way down, this one right here is the artboard tool. And if you hover over it, it will tell you what it is. And also, this is a new enhancement with Illustrator. It gives you a little demo of what each tool does. If you click on Learn More, it gives you kind of the step-by-step instructions on how to use the tool. Definitely play around with those. When I was practicing yesterday, I was seeing kind of all these new tools that have been enhanced since the last time I got into this demo. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do. If I just click on the artboard tool, though, you can see it's drawn this like blue dotted line around the artboard, meaning that this is artboard 1. Remember these numbers because they will be important when it comes time to export the drawings. Once this tool is selected, you can play with the size of the current artboard, and you can also draw out others below it. So if you were in a project where you wanted to kind of play around with drawings on artboard 1 and then combine them on artboard 2, the artboard tool is what allows you to do that. So let me flip back over to the actual demo panel, and let's go over how to play with some of these other tools. So at the top of your tool panel, these are probably your two most important tools. The black arrow, as you can see, is your selection tool. This lets you select entire objects. The direct selection tool, particularly important in Illustrator, allows you to, I want to get this little illustration to pop up for you. This allows you to select individual anchor points and play with the size and dimensions of those, which you'll probably use a lot if you're kind of building and modifying shapes in Illustrator. To draw a basic shape, let's go down to this tool right here. This is our rectangle tool. And if you can see, if any of these squares have a little white arrow in the bottom right-hand corner, if I click and hold on that, it shows you all of the different tools that can be drawn once you select that one main tool. And then if I hover over to this white arrow on the right-hand side of the panel, I get this little floating tool panel that you can kind of arrange on your artboard or sorry, like your Illustrator dashboard. So if this seems like a tool that you're going to go back to, it's helpful to have it accessible on the dashboard. So you can see with the rectangle tool, you can also do rounded rectangle, ellipse, which is how you would draw a circle, a polygon, and then this star tool. Let's start with just a basic square or a basic rectangle. Once I have my rectangle tool selected, this is what lets me draw out just a run-of-the-mill rectangle. I can just pull it out. If I want to draw a perfect square, there are two different ways. One is to hold down the shift key, and this is what allows you to constrain proportions when you're drawing. So this is going to keep this dimensions in perfect square. And then I'll go back to my direct select tool so you can kind of see that. The other way is with the rectangle tool selected, and you see this hash mark saying that that's, this, it's ready to draw a rectangle. If I just click on the screen, you get a window that allows you to type in the height and width. So let's say I want to draw like a perfect 1x1 rectangle, click OK, and that's what it's produced for me there. And let me also, this color is a little bit hard to see. So let's change the fill and the stroke on this rectangle. With my direct select tool, I'll select that shape I just drew, go up to this top menu in Illustrator, and you can see you've got two different squares of color. The fill color is the inside color, the stroke color is the outside color. That's just kind of like the borderline around the shape. So let's draw this drop down here and adjust the color on this to be red. And then maybe I'll also give it a stroke outline of something bright so you can see. That's tough to see because the stroke is so small, but if I go over one window, this one point, this is the width of the stroke. So if I bump that up, that's how you make that stroke on the shape a little bit wider. If you want to add custom colors to your color panel, you're going to go down to this plus mark and click new swatch. And this is where it shows you the CMYK values for the color. So if if you go to the branding site and see the CMYK values for the Wild Cornell Medicine brand colors, you're going to type those in here and then click OK, and it will add it to your, I have a Wild Cornell Medicine library. It will add it to your swatch panel so that you can go back then and pull these new colors that you've added. So this is one I've already labeled Cornell Dark Orange. So that's how, if you want to add your branded colors into your tool panel, you just add it as a swatch. Once you have a shape drawn, and let me go back and draw a new one out. You can play with adding and subtracting anchor points to modify the shape further. So once I've got this shape selected, and you can see it's selected because it has the blue box around it. If I click, I can either go over to the tool panel to the add anchor point tool itself, or there are always shortcuts for these. Option minus lets you delete an anchor point. Option plus lets you add it. I'll go to the tool now so you can kind of see what's going on, but let's play first with delete an anchor point so you can see what happens there. If I have delete anchor point selected and then I click on the point here, you can see it just deleted that anchor point. So my shape becomes kind of this triangle shape. Ah. Sorry guys, spam call on my work phone. If I want to add an anchor point, let me undo delete, and we're going to go back over to this tool, add an anchor point, and then anywhere on the path of the shape, I can add a new anchor point. So let's do one here and here. And then once you've added an anchor point, you can adjust those a little bit further by going to the direct select tool and then kind of pulling this around and modifying your shape a little bit. And then if I want to play with color here, we've got a cool bow tie shape to work with. Any questions about drawing shapes, adding fill and stroke, and playing with anchor points?
Bridget, there was a quick question about how you access the more tools when you were
Oh,
drawing
yeah.
out the square. Could you show that one more time?
Definitely. So let me even go back to the very beginning. So on my tool panel, when you zoom in closely, and let me see. Oh, Zooming, unfortunately, doesn't show you the tool panel bigger. If you go to the tool, there's a little white arrow in the bottom right-hand corner. Click and hold on that, and it shows you all of the different tools available underneath that one. And then from there, what I did was go over to this little white arrow on the right-hand side, and that's what makes this that little floatable menu.
Perfect. Um,
Okay.
is there a way to symmetrically move opposite-sided anchor points? Like to move, I guess, two anchor
Mm,
points simultaneously so they are, I guess, moving at the same, like, equidistant or something like that?
that's a cool question. Let's play with
Andrew,
this.
please correct me if I'm wrong and interpret the question.
Like, so that I'm pulling the two in at the same speed to the same distance. I think I
Yeah,
know
I
what
think
you
that's the only
at. Yeah.
way. I mean, I'm sure you could do it one by one with guides, but I don't know if
Yeah,
there's a way to do two at one. Okay, yes, Andrew confirms that what I'm trying to explain is correct.
that is the question. Okay, cool. So I just added some anchor points and let me see.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to move them one by one, but
But that is a good question. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a way to select multiple anchor points and move them at the same time. Andrew, I can play around with that and get back to you.
yeah,
I'm
we
sure
can put
there's
it up
a
in the
way and
follow-up
yeah,
email.
yeah, good question. Because it does seem like slightly more guesswork if you're moving individual points, but but moving connected anchor points at the same distance and angle sounds like a good thing to investigate. Let's go on to combining shapes, combining two simple shapes to make a more complex one. So let's try to build this arrow using some of our Pathfinder tools. So to build this, if you break this down into two different shapes, it's going to be a rectangle and a triangle. So we'll go back to the rectangle tool, draw out the rectangle as we did before, and then to draw a triangle. So you just saw me kind of make a triangle by drawing a square and then deleting an anchor point. I think an even easier way is to use this polygon tool. And this is just, a multiple-sided shape. And once I have that tool selected, again, if I click on the board, it's going to give me some parameters to draw a polygon. A three-sided polygon will give me a triangle. And once I've got this triangle, I can kind of play with size a little bit if I have direct select tool. If I have my anchor points, I can make this a little bit, play with the shape of the arrow, whatever you like. Um, and again, yeah, this would be one where drawing those two anchors at the same angle would be helpful. Once you've got the triangle about how you like it, and let me actually change the color of this so you can see what we're doing here. We're working with two separate shapes and we're going to make them one. Once you have the triangle drawn, with this selection tool selected, if I hover down on the corner, you can see I've got this rounded arrow. This is what's going to let me rotate the shape and flip it around and then just drag it into place at the front of the rectangle. And we've got two distinct, a triangle and a rectangle. I want to make these into one shape that I can work with. So I'm going to select each tool or each shape, select it, click with the select arrow, hold down the shift key. That's what allows you to select multiple shapes at once, and select the rectangle tool. The other way to do that is with your selection tool selected, just drag a little box around each shape and that will do the same thing. It'll select both of your shapes. And then you can see I've already got this menu selected. This is the Pathfinder window. If there's ever a tool you're looking for that you can't find, clicking on window, it's going to show you, this is kind of like everything available underneath the window panel. I've got Pathfinder selected below, so that is there. But also the search arrow in Illustrator is a helpful tool. If you just select the search, type in Pathfinder into the window, hit enter, it's going to show you exactly where that Pathfinder tool is available. And Pathfinder is the tool that's going to let you unite and subtract shapes together. So with the Pathfinder selected and my two shapes selected, I'm going to go to the shape mode. Again, if I hover over it, it tells me unite, and then it's also showing me the shortcut for how to do it. I'm just going to click unite, and then as you can see, it's combined these two shapes together. It even automatically made the same fill color just to kind of show you that this is now one shape that you're working with. Any questions about using that unite function?
Not that I can see.
Okay, awesome. And let me go ahead and I'll even change the fill color so you can see that now we've just got one shape you can play with. Okay, let's do a couple more things with this Pathfinder tool. If you have two shapes, there are a couple different ways to intersect and exclude them. So here I've just drawn two squares together. I'm going to pull them on top of each other, select both in the same manner I did before, and then let's see what happens when I click minus front. That's going to punch out the one on the front. If I do intersect, it's going to eliminate everything except for the area of the shapes that intersect with each other. And if I do exclude, it's going to only punch out the area where they do intersect and everything else is going to be left. So that's just kind of a cool way to play around with combining different basic shapes into more complex ones. I'll show you one more time how to use this minus front tool because we're going to use that later to draw the actual mitochondria. So here I've got two shapes drawn, one larger triangle, and let me actually even make this even bigger. And let's say I want to punch out a star shape from the shape below it. One thing that will be important is to make sure I have the shapes arranged in the right order. So the square, I want to make sure this star is on front. So I will select the star image, go up to Object, down to Arrange. And this is really important. This comes up a lot. I want to make sure the star is the very top shape. So I'm going to bring this to front, pull it on top of the shape underneath, select both, again by doing Shift and holding them both down, and then we'll do minus the front, and this just popped out the little star shape, and I've got this funky triangle to work with. Any questions about the Pathfinder tool?
Hey, Bridget, there was a question, and let me know if I answered this correctly. When you combined the two shapes to create the arrow, Claire asked, what if you don't want the color of each of the two united shapes to change? I believe at that point, once you combine a shape, it's considered one entity in Illustrator, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So if you want to keep the two, if you want to keep them two different colors, you probably just keep them two different shapes.
Can you group the two shapes in Illustrator so that you can move it together, but
Oh,
they're
that's a good, yes,
combined?
let me show you how to do that, yeah. So let's say we want the rectangle and let's draw this triangle again. We want to keep them different colors. So in this case, rather than unite, yeah, just as Vanessa mentioned, I'll select them so that they're both selected and then go up to Object Group. And this way you can move it around as if it's one, but it is still treating them like two different shapes. So the colors stay the same. Yeah, great point. Okay, let's move on to, we've got about 15 minutes, which is perfect. Let's move on to drawing this mitochondria, which is really just using some of the tools that we've already played around with a little bit to draw a more complex shape. So we're going to start by drawing this, the rounded rectangle you see underneath. And to do that, I'm going to combine a rectangle with an ellipse. And the ellipse, again, if I were to just draw this out as it would give me an oval shape. But if I want to keep it a perfect circle, I would do the same thing I would do when drawing a square. Hold down the Shift key when you draw your circle, and it will keep this as a perfect circle shape. And then once I've got these two shapes drawn, I will pull the circle into place. I can kind of play around with the size. And again, hold down my Shift key so that it doesn't distort the shape because we want to keep it kind of like this nice circle. And kind of draw it so that the points are intersecting. Get it as close as I can. Let's go with that for the purpose of time. I'm gonna combine these two using the Unite tool. So click Unite, and then we've got just one kind of rounded rectangle shape. From here, if I click Option and drag the shape out, ah, it's gonna duplicate that shape right below it. I'll use this rotate tool once more to flip it around. Pull it on top, and we've got this one kind of long cylindrical rounded rectangle, and then I can unite these two shapes again using the same method. Select one, hold down Shift, select the other, click Unite, and then we've got just this one kind of base mitochondria shape. From here, I'll hold down Option again to draw a second one out. This is honestly driving me a little bit nuts because the circle's not lining up with the square. Let me try this one more time. All right, that's a better look. Okay, we'll repeat these steps. Unite. Select, Shift, select, Unite. Select again, Option, drag to draw out a duplicate shape. And now we've got kind of this, the large rectangle that will be kind of the base of the mitochondria shape. Now we need to draw these little tiny rounded rectangles. To here, I got my rectangle tool selected on the page. I will go to the rounded rectangle tool and draw out one nice kind of tall, slender shape. I'm also going to change the color of this so that we can tell it's distinct. Okay. From here, I want to draw out several more. So I'll select this tall, thin orange shape. Again, hold down my Option key and drag out several. And this is just ensuring that the shapes I'm making are exact replicas of each other, which will be important in drawing the final shape. Let's just draw a couple more of these. Now you can see that they're a little bit haphazard, like the ones at the top aren't totally lined up, the ones at the bottom aren't totally lined up. I want to use the align tool to make sure these are all in perfect alignment. So I'm going to select my shape, hold down Shift so that I can select a few more. And you can see I've just selected the ones that are kind of on the top of this shape. On the Pathfinder window, let me go to Align. And this is the way that you can align all of these different objects, which can be really helpful if you're drawing kind of more intricate shapes. If I go down to Vertical Align Top, that's going to bump all those shapes up so that they're along the same plane on the top of them. And then we'll do the exact same thing with the shapes on the bottom, only we'll use Vertical Align Bottom. And it kind of did the same thing for those two, or for the four shapes on the bottom. Now let's say I want to make sure I've got the equal amount of space between every shape on the board. Let me hover over all of these objects, select them, and then I'll go down to Horizontal Distribute Center. That put the exact amount of shape between all of the shapes on the board. Any questions about alignment? Okay, cool. So let's go to the next step in this. I want to select all of these objects and group them. So this is kind of like what we just did with the arrow. Now all of these shapes can be moved as one. And I can even, because we've got an especially long rectangle, I can even draw out a second set. And let me group this together too. I'm going to pull this down on top of this bottom rectangle. So you can see now I've got the pink rectangle on the bottom and then these orange shapes on top. And this is functioning as one shape. I want to make sure that this shape is considered to be the one on the top so that I can use my minus front tool. So I'm going to go up to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front, just to make sure. I'm going to select both shapes by holding down Shift, go back over to Pathfinder, click minus front, and we just punched out that shape of the small rectangles from this rectangle. And now from here, let me adjust the size a tiny bit. I'll change the color so that it gives us a nice contrast. And we can pull it on top of the larger rectangle. And we have kind of an approximation of this mitochondria shape. Any questions about any of the tools or shapes we just drew?
No questions about that. Kaylee did mention if you want to make small adjustments to a shape, you can use the info panel as well instead of just using the mouse if you want to make, I guess, more precise adjustments to a shape. And then Jaffer has asked, and I know this is not part of the demo, but I just wanted to address it in case people aren't following the chat. Jaffer had a question about generative recolor. That is a very new feature in Illustrator, as well as a lot of the Adobe services. Adobe has been adding quite a lot of AI features into many of its apps, including Photoshop as well. Generative recolor, which is under the Edit panel in your menu, under Edit Colors, you'll see Generative Recolor. And it's just an AI prompt where you can type in, I guess, what color scheme you want. I've put a link in the chat if you want to take a look at it, since it's kind of outside of this particular demonstration. But I think it would be hard to like select these objects that Bridget is creating and give it a random color palette. It's kind of like you can do hues like strawberry fields, like as a prompt, and it would give you an interesting color palette. That's kind of what it's meant for, not necessarily making simple color changes like Bridget is demonstrating.
Well, thank you so much on that. I
No
have not
problem.
played with the generative color stuff, so yeah,
Yeah,
great question.
it's really new. The AI features in Adobe are very cool. I've actually used them to make edits in Photoshop that are much easier than me going in and like removing something that's very hard to recolor on like a very complicated background. So I definitely suggest that you check it out. I can add something in the follow-up email about some of the AI features. I really highly recommend that you test them.
Cool.
Oh, we have a question from Tristan. Can you cut text out of a shape?
Can you cut text out of a shape? What is I'm not quite, I understand, like, is the file a JPEG file or is it a shape you've drawn that has text in it already?
Tristan, are you trying to just put text in a shape, like let's say a rectangle, and then cut it out of that shape, perhaps? Yes, that is what he is trying to convey. I think as long as you turn the text into a shape, and then so text is not considered a shape in Adobe Illustrator unless you make it that way. So you have to select all of your text, make it a shape, meaning you cannot edit it anymore as text. So make sure that you have it spelled correctly. And then you can do what Bridget has been doing, which is selecting all the text, which is now its own shape, and then whatever shape is, surrounding it, and it should cut out that text. I think Michele has his hand raised. 1 second. Michele, you should be able to unmute if you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. No, I wanted to say, well, Bridget was when you were trying to move this rectangle by a tiny amount. If you go to the properties, see the next to libraries, there is the properties yeah, there. Then you can change the size, the height and the size by millimeters amount.
Cool.
So you can use that. If you put it in point, then it's even simpler because then you can change by 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. And so you can make it exactly the same. I think to change it in point, you have to change the whole thing in
I think you have to change the whole, yeah, all the settings.
the settings.
No.
I mean, if you play, I mean, this goes to 10,000 of an inch, so you can just change a little bit at a time, and we get to the right. So instead of moving, because sometimes moving the mouse by tiny mouse is difficult.
You can't quite get it. Yeah, great. That's very helpful. You can just punch in numerical stuff. Yeah. And what Michaela is saying about right now it's in inches. If you go back into, I believe it's in document setup, you can change the units. So what he was saying, if it's in points, yeah, that gives you even a little bit more control.
Yeah.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes, so let me just get through a tiny bit more of this, which is how to add text and arrows. Quite easy. Again, I'm going to go to my tool panel and select the type tool, and then draw out a text box. And then I'm just going to type in whatever I like. For in this case, we want to say figure 2 because we're drawing 2 mitochondria. If I have that text selected, you can see also typically the at the top, maybe, yeah. If I go up to the top of my toolbar and I just clicked on the character hyperlink, this pulls up a panel like similar kind of to what you would see in Word, where it has my font selection, size, all of that. So from here, I can change the size of the font on the screen. I can change the font to, I'm going to put this in 1898 Sans, which is our Weill Cornell font. I can change the spacing. But this is, let's just make sure it's fairly readable. Maybe I'll even make it bold. And then if I go back to select, I can even play with the size of that text box around it and kind of play with spacing of the text. So that really quickly is how you add text to the artboard. This arrow is also very easy. Let me get rid of this and I'll show you from the very beginning. I'm going to use the line segment tool to do this. So, and let's make sure I've got at the top, I can see I've got stroke selected to be black and it's 2 points. So if I have this, again, I can just hold out Shift, this magical shortcut to draw a perfectly straight line. And this has given me a line segment. If I want to play with that to make it a little bit fancier, go up and click on stroke, and this gives you a menu of different options to modify the stroke line itself. And I want to put an arrowhead pointing to the right. So let's try that one. And voila, we've got a couple different arrows. You can see on the artboard right below this, I have a couple dash lines to do that. Oh, that changed the, here you can see, here's how you change where the arrow is pointing. But I actually want to draw a second one. Ah, trouble with arrows. Hit stroke. Oh, we could put this arrow at the front. And then if I hit dashed line in this box right here, that's how I got the dashed line appearance of that arrow. Okay. And now really quickly, you can also add, so this is an actual JPEG file that you can add to an artboard as well. To do that, you're just going to do file place. This is going to pull up the files on your computer. I've got a mitochondria JPEG right here that I can play with. Yep, I want to put it in as a JPEG. And then once it's in my little cursor, if I click this, it pulls up a menu that allows me to crop the image. So from here, I can pull this over to the area I want, make it the size I want, hit return, and it's going to crop out all of the areas of the photo that weren't selected. And I can add a little bit of text underneath. Whoop. Let me try that again. It's added a text box right on top of it, but we actually want it just below. And let's say PNG powerhouse. All right. So let's pretend, I'll do one more quick thing because we're just about at time. Let's pretend this is the finished image. This diagram is complete. I want to export it to a PDF file or a JPEG file so that I can put it in an email or send it to someone. Again, if I click back on this artboard tool, it shows me this 08. This is the number to remember because this is actually when I select the range of artboards I want to export, that's the number that will be important. So let's go to File Export, Export for Screens. Oh, actually, wait, let's do Export As. And here you can see it's got my Illustrator for Scientists PNG label. I want to use artboard, then I want to make sure the range I've selected is number 8 because that's that final artboard that has the full diagram. Click export. I'm going to export it as if I do it as a PNG, it will have a transparent background. If you did it as a JPEG, it would have a white. So that's kind of an important thing to remember. I can also make it a white background with a PNG. Click OK. And then let's see if I can open up. I think I'll have to close out of Illustrator, but this has just saved this as a PNG file in my documents that I can get to. And I'll kind of go ahead and I'll locate that while we take more questions. Any more questions on the demo, on the rest of the demo?
Oh, how do you convert text to an object?
Convert text to an object. Let's see. So let me make this. Oh, this is already the text.
It's if you go under the type menu, once you type out the text, you're just going to go to your type menu, and there should be an option to create outlines. Creating outlines is what makes your text an object.
And then you can see, yeah, then if I click on each individual letter, it's got all the anchor points. So as Vanessa was saying, that's how you know that this has gone from text to an object.
Yeah, and just remember too, I know I mentioned it once, but I think it's super important because I've also given myself this headache. Just make sure everything is spelled correctly because once you make it an object, you can no longer edit that text and then you kind of have to start again. So just save yourself the headache from my own, you know, forays into Illustrator, please. I think that is it in terms of questions, Bridget.
Okay.
I see some thank yous that I've gotten for your presentation. Awesome.
Great.
And thank you everybody for attending this session. If you do have more questions, you know, in the follow-up email, please feel free to just hit reply, and anything that we can help with, you know, we'll try to point you in the right direction, but we'll be sure to include the information again of how to request Adobe Creative Cloud so that you can get access to Illustrator, as well as some other guides that are hopefully helpful to your learning the tool. But thank you guys so much for joining. And Bridget, thank you for helping us learn more about Illustrator.
Thank you. Enjoy. Have fun.
Have a good summer, everyone. We'll see you in the
Have a good
fall.
summer.
And yes, Matina, we will send the recording. Don't worry, in a follow-up email. Have a good one, guys.